Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
And we want to talk with you today about keeping communication open, having a healthy communication.
How do we say what we need to say well?
Yeah, it's a
So,
skill. It's not
yeah.
just something that just drops on us because we're here.
Right. So we have to develop good skills and understanding of the way we do it to
Yeah.
be able to make it easier for our spouse to hear what we're saying.
You know, we need to make sure that we're not closing our spouse by the way we're saying something, and we need to be aware if we're closing to make our spouse aware of the behaviors that are happening that are closing us.
So speaking tenderly, sometimes, when we bring up an issue, we got a lot of tone because in the moment, I'm feeling it, I'm upset, it just happened.
Yeah.
It's best to wait and let those emotions settle out so that we can come without emotion, without intensity. Because if we have some tone going on, some choice of words, because my emotions, my negative emotions are showing, it's probably not going to feel tender. It's probably going to feel like a jab.
Sometimes, we may need to say things like, hey, could you turn the intensity down a little bit? I think I
Right.
could hear you better if you didn't have maybe a certain look on your face, something like that. So we're going to have different styles in the way we communicate.
We have to be able to speak openly. Now that's hard because sometimes when we're struggling, we've damaged that trust that you're there for me, you will hear me, you care about what's going on with me. So while we're rebuilding that, we have to create a safety. We have to be approachable, show an interest so our spouse can be open.
We don't need to give negative feedback to our spouse when they open up to us because I don't want to hear what you have to share. So we need to realize our spouse isn't always going to be sharing something that we're going to be excited to hear, yet at the same time we can make them aware of some way that is being communicated that is negative to us.
So you say our spouse shares a negative emotion, the way it feels to be married to us, and we blame and accuse. Well, you shouldn't feel that way. We're dismissive, we reject, we minimize. Well, I wouldn't have done it if you hadn't done this. And it's like, well, I still need you to hear this behavior's not okay with me.
That's right.
Now, was I provoked? Could have been, but that doesn't make, two wrongs don't make a right, and your spouse probably didn't mean to provoke you. And so being able to hear and be able to tell each other, this is not okay for me.
Sometimes if a discussion becomes intense, we may need to take a break for maybe 20 or 30 minutes and come back and talk about it later once we have calmed down so that we don't say something that we're going to regret later.
And it's okay if it takes a few sittings to cover something.
Right.
Talk about it. If you escalate, then you need to be aware of that, and you need to say, hey, I'm getting escalated here. Can we lay this down for now, but let's pick it up later today or tomorrow. You don't want to go later than tomorrow. If couples don't get back to it, then the one who needed to address that issue is going to be really tempted to push, because if we stop talking about it, we won't talk about it again. Can you see that if you're that person, you're setting your spouse up for all this aggression and negativity?
Right.
Does it make the aggression and negativity okay? No, it doesn't. But you're putting a stumbling block there. Can you see that if you're the one being aggressive and negative, that you're putting a stumbling block before your spouse to withdraw from you and not want to come back to this?
Yeah.
We create expectations of how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And so we have to create new expectations where our spouse feels safe.
So we need to be able to listen and not become offended. And so there's an art to that, sometimes to be able to see yourself as a third party hearing what your spouse has to say about you, so that you don't get so wrapped up in what they're saying that you become defensive.
And we can help this by not using you statements. It's important to make it clear to our spouse, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about what it feels like to be me. I'm not saying that you are disrespectful or rude. I'm saying that the way you're coming across to me creates that feeling for me. And you need to hear that. We don't need to say to our spouse, well, that's the way I am. You just need to learn to accept me like I am.
Or that I didn't mean it that way, therefore you shouldn't have taken it that way. So sometimes we need to realize even if you didn't intend something, your spouse can still feel the impact of something you said, the way you said it,
Yeah.
and you may need to adjust that
Yeah.
so that the impact that they're having doesn't push them away.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a morally good person standing before God and saying, "Hey, I did all the right things," and God's like, "But you didn't have a relationship with me."
Right.
Well, my intentions were so good,
I
and
meant
it's like,
to.
yeah,
I meant
it's like,
to.
well, relationship was the key.
Right, right.
So, speaking honestly, being able to say, "I'm sorry," and being able to say, "Will you forgive me?" if we step on our spouse's emotional toes is important going forward.
We need to make sure that we're speaking honestly, and that's going to mean that we're willing to admit when we make mistakes. And so, in James chapter 5, he says to confess your faults one to another that you may be healed. That we need to have that space of time where we are willing to admit to our spouse, I made a mistake.
We need to be assertive. That means we need to be able to boldly say what we're dealing with. But we have to boldly say it in a nice way, too, so
Right.
we'll be heard. But we should address our issues. That's a positive thing.
In other words, we can't sweep things under the rug and believe that they're going to go away just because I don't see it. So
Yeah.
if there's an issue, it needs to be faced. It needs to be dealt with.
So we want to listen carefully. A lot of times what we see in struggling marriages is everybody's talking. Everybody wants to be the speaker, but nobody wants to be an active listener.
We need to pay close attention. A lot of times this is going to involve looking at your partner
looking in their eyes.
not having your mind or your attention on your phone or on some other things that are going on around you.
That says I really care about what's going on with you. I really care about you. And so we never want to minimize our spouse's perspective in the marriage as if my perspective is the only one that counts here. This is what's going on. No, what's going on is the way he is feeling it and the way she's experiencing it too. We apologize. Our neighbors are practicing shooting their guns.
I mean, it sounds like a war zone. My goodness.
Enjoy.
On the battlefield.
We're in the country. Okay, so here we go
All right,
with gunshots
so
in the background.
How about this? Next point. Good listening skills require us to totally focus, just like we have been totally focusing on this material, talking with you, even though there's been all kinds of distractions going on in the background. So totally focusing on your spouse and what your spouse has to present to you,
Not
asking
being
questions.
distracted. Some of us are messing with our phones when our spouse is sharing their heart. What does that say?
Yeah.
We have to lay the phone down, take a few minutes. Surely you can take 5 or 10 minutes. Let's say also, though, don't monologue. Don't give grand soliloquies and make your spouse your audience while you perform a show in front of them. Be brief. Be able to make your thoughts and feelings more concise so you don't get a lot of words going on that hide what your message really was.
And be able to repeat back what you hear your spouse saying. A lot of times that gives them the confidence that you correctly heard what they were saying and they know you caught it.
I like Ephesians 4:29. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only that's helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.
And then James 1:19, to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger.
Right. So, think on the scriptures as you think about how you should share an issue and how you should listen.
So all this is about being open and doing what's needed to keep from closing your partner.